Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this Mishcon Academy session, part of a series of online events, videos and podcasts looking at the biggest issues facing society today. Just to introduce myself, I'm Emily Nicholson, a partner at Mishcon, and I will be hosting today's event. Before I introduce Penny, there are some housekeeping points to mention. If you're online, you've joined this session automatically on mute and without video. If you have a question, you can use the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen, and I will pick this up. If you have any technical issues during the event, please feel free to let us know via the chat, and one of the Mishcon team will help you. If you're in the room, just raise your hand. So I am absolutely delighted to be here today with Penny. Penny was Conservative MP for 14 years, holding a dazzling array of fascinating roles in government, culminating in carrying the sword of state at the coronation as Lord President of the Council. Having narrowly lost her seat at the last election by a few hundred votes, it is widely acknowledged that she would have been a strong leadership contender had she been in Parliament, with Kemi recently calling her a titan of the Conservative Party. Among her many achievements in Parliament, including being the first woman Defence Minister, as well as Minister for Armed Forces and Equalities Minister, Penny famously had the honour to be able to confirm to the House, when then Prime Minister Liz Truss, that she was not hiding under a desk. Welcome, Penny. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Penny, as I said, you were MP for 14 years, twice with your hat in the ring for leadership. You had a front row seat to such a turbulent and extraordinary period in our politics. And then one day you're in government, in the cut of thrust of everything and involved in everything. And then the next day, that's it, there's a general election and you don't have a job anymore. That must be such a massive and almost traumatic transition in life. How do you deal with that kind of massive change?
So, well, on election day, the result was not the worst part of my day, because in the morning, any of you that know about electioneering, you go and deliver leaflets very early reminding everyone to vote. And then what generally happens is your team go to the local cafe, have a big cooked breakfast, and then you're back out getting the vote out. And my team I didn't join my team for breakfast because I was at the vet's.
Oh no.
With one of my cats, and the vet was telling me to put them to sleep. So that's how my election day started. I resisted the vet's advice, and the cat is fine and still going strong. So it had a happy ending. So I was already quite emotionally drained by the end. But I knew, although I'd polled my seat at the start of the campaign, I was 5% ahead, which would have given me about 3,000 majority. I knew in Portsmouth, after the D-Day episode, where the Prime Minister came back early from D-Day, and my constituents did not feel represented at that event, that I wasn't going to recover from that. So I already kind of knew that it was I was unlikely to retain what has been a swing seat. It's usually the colour of government. If I had retained it, it would have been the first time in its history that it wouldn't have been the colour of government. So I was fairly kind of well adjusted to what happened, was able to make a coherent speech on the night. But actually afterwards, you don't just down tools. You have a huge amount to do. You've got a whole team that has lost their job as well. And they need to find work. You've got a massive handover job to your successor to do. You've got to shut your office down, and all that takes actually several months. So I just went straight back into that, kept busy, started thinking about what I should do next. And I actually haven't taken a day off since I lost my seat. And I think that's the best way to deal with it. And, keep calm, carry on, and keep busy.
Great. Well, you've certainly managed that. And that is shown by the number and array of cabinet roles you held in Parliament, including being the first woman Defence Minister under May, Minister for Armed Forces under Cameron, Equalities Minister, and finally Leader of the House and Lord President of the Council under Rishi Sunak. However, you also had not one but two stalkers during your time as an MP, both of which required engagement with the police. And when we were chatting earlier, you said, it's okay, I've only needed to go to court twice. But it's sort of staggering that you would need to go to court at all. Is this the price that you pay for being a woman in politics?
So when I talk about these sorts of issues, I always caveat this with I'm planning on tunneling back in. The downsides to the job are far outweighed by the upsides. It's a most amazing job, and I encourage women in particular who feel that they want to do that to go for it. And I feel much better protected now than I did when I was starting out. I think over my whole career, I've had just shy of about 800 threats. Most of them are very easily dealt with, and I've never really felt overtly concerned about my personal safety. But I was very conscious of the steps that I needed to take to look after myself, and perhaps more importantly, my team, my staff. I didn't have an office on the high street. I did to start with, but then I put us in a business park behind a cordon, and you just need to, not mess around with these things so you can actually go and do your job. I had a case very early on in my parliamentary career, which eventually ended up being a criminal case, and I've got a live case at the moment. But most things are nipped in the bud and dealt with very, very swiftly. And it is, I'm afraid, part of the job. If you're in any public life, that's what happens to you. And actually, it's not about necessarily people hating you or disagreeing with you. The current case is someone really loves me. They don't really hate me. It's just part of public life, unfortunately.
And is that, it's obviously often peculiarly towards women, that kind of attention, but being a woman in politics more generally, and given you were there for 14 years, so that's quite a period of time, did you feel as a woman you were valued, able to do your best job? Was it a supportive and encouraging environment? Were you able to do your best there?
So it varies from place to place and job to job, really. But I think what's important is to know why you're there, know what you have to contribute, and to, I think, have a successful career in politics. You've got to know what it is you're trying to get done. If you get there and you haven't really figured that out, life is miserable, because the only sort of happiness you get is if someone gives you a junior ministerial job, or that's no way to be happy in politics. It's getting stuff done, it's making a difference. That's what's important. And I think that although there's a pushback against people worrying about whether you've got a representative organization, or in Parliament's case, House of Commons, I think those things are really important. I do this exercise sometimes when I go and talk to people, and I ask, I won't do it now and embarrass people, but I pick on a chap in the audience, and I get them to take the things out of their pockets, their mobile phone, their wallet, and keys is generally what is secreted about a chap. And then I ask the ladies in the room to look in their handbags. I ask them if they've got keys, phone, wallet, and anything else in their handbags. And the average number of items in a woman's handbag is 75. I did this at a Wren's event, sort of Wren's Association event at the weekend, and one lady in her evening bag had a swimming costume. I was asking her if she's going to miss the ferry home. She got plans. Another lady had a can of WD-40. And the reason why we do that is because we're anticipating every single flaming thing that could happen that day, what our kids need, what our grandkids need, what our colleagues need, what might happen this evening, another event you've got to go to, everything. We bring a particular mindset that fellas have a lot to offer as well, particular traits, but we think differently about situations. We're vital, for anticipating and having the imagination for what could happen. And particularly in the complex world we're living in, where situational fluency is everything, that attitude and mindset is invaluable. So it's really important that women are represented in every forum, but particularly the House of Commons.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. And that actually leads us really nicely onto, because I want to talk to a little bit about defence, because you were the first woman Defence Secretary. And it's kind of extraordinary when we've managed to have 2 female prime ministers that still it took until 2019 to have a female Defence Secretary. Given your particular background, and just for the room, Penny's a naval reservist, your father was a paratrooper. Did I read somewhere you think you were named after HMS Penelope?
Yes, which was the first Leander class frigate to be able to do a complete about face within her own length. So I always joke this is perfect qualification for being a politician.
So did the defence role come quite naturally to you? Because Defence Secretary was not your first defence role. You were also Armed Forces before that.
Yes, I think when you get into Parliament, you have to be a jack of all trades. You're dealing with just a huge variety of issues that your constituents bring you that you need to go and talk about. But I think you want to really also focus on a few things that you can get deep knowledge about. So I'd been on the Defence Select Committee, represented obviously the home of the Surface Fleet. And so defence was a natural thing for me to focus on and concentrate on. And David Cameron made me Armed Forces Minister at a time when it was the height of what was known as Op Shader, so that's Iraq and Syria. My Secretary of State at the time had 4 holidays that year. So he literally delegated the whole of operations and force generation to me. And I did that for about 15 months, and probably the busiest time for our operations that there's been in the last 20 years. So I learned a huge amount, worked with some amazing people, and it was great when I eventually became Secretary of State, even though it was for a brief period of time. I knew what I wanted to do and could hit the ground running, and had that rapport and trust with the senior military there.
Yeah, I bet they were delighted to have someone who knew their way around a Leander. So we discussed on our prep call there is a defence review coming up, but I wondered what your view is from the defence perspective, given that we're in a very unstable world of global politics, and defence-wise, we may not be able to rely on the US in the way maybe we had before. What's your view on our current defence situation and where we need to go?
So situations change, but what is critical is that you have the architecture in Whitehall to be able to understand what is happening and why, and respond to it. And there are always defence reviews, and there are always deep dives into particular areas of national security. But you have to have the drumbeat in Whitehall to be continually reviewing these things. You won't get excellence in any area unless it's a habit, unless you're continually doing that. And Whitehall generally does that really badly. It's got a piece of work, it does it, then it forgets about it. It stops exercising and having practice Cobra meetings because there's always something more important to do. So I think the first thing is you've got to get more on the front foot in Whitehall, whether that's your domestic civil contingencies or its defence. I think under Boris Johnson, for example, the National Security Council, which usually met every week, just stopped meeting. And so you can't give ministers the awareness they need if you don't give them any information products, if you're not continually making sure people are thinking about things they need to really think about. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we have got to spend more on defence. NATO's own ambitions would require us to spend about 20 billion more a year on defence, which is nearly a third extra. And so for government, you you've got to accept that fact, and you then have to trim other areas. You right now we need to focus on what only government can do, and we've got to find other ways of making other stuff happen. I think we're at a real crossroads at the moment. A lot of analysts are saying that if we don't start to have the capabilities and the force generation to stand up credible deterrents, then we are going to be faced with a much worse situation in fairly short order, and potentially a conflict that we will be involved in directly. So we're in a real turning point, I think, for our country. And so every moment I get, I'm saying that, and encouraging people to make those investments, and also to put through the additional reforms that we need on procurement and all of those other things. And then the final thing is about our own domestic resilience. We've just got to take a whole of society approach to that. We've just stood down, I think literally a week ago, there's an announcement by the NHS that it was disbanding its volunteers. We stood up during COVID about 750,000 people who were first responders or doing various things to help bolster social care. They've just disbanded that operation. And at a time when, the health service is under great pressure, and you want to be making sure that you've got, if something, God forbid, like a pandemic happened again, or, you've got a cyber attack that takes out our ability to communicate with each other. You want those local networks. You want local people who want to take responsibility and help, to be able to be contacted, to be able to help. And the public want to help. Some of them, I can tell you, having manned a vaccination centre car park, some of them love it. It would be a popular thing to do, but we've just stood that down. That's wrong. We need to give people the tools they need to help, if, God forbid, the worst happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite scary, but quite a lot about the world is quite scary right now. So let's hope that the Defence Review is forceful enough.
We live in hope.
Now, you can't speak to Penny Mordaunt without talking about the coronation. Your coronation, it nearly was. So your role was became iconic, really, and it really threw a modern light on something that's incredibly traditional and quite dour in some respects, and not least because you were the first woman to carry and present the Dual Sword of Offering, which is a fantastic name. We must get one of those. So you obviously had a huge reaction from it, and indeed overnight, I think, became the favourite to succeed Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservative Party. How did the royal family take your role or their role in your coronation, your role in their coronation?
Well, funny you should say that, because I had a lovely letter from a member of the royal family a few days after the coronation. Very lovely letter thanking me for my role and the efforts that I'd taken, but it started, "How kind of the King and Queen to come to your event this afternoon." But it was a huge honour to do it, and occasionally you're presented with those sorts of amazing opportunities. And I mean, for women, there's no advice at all about what you should wear. In fact, nobody asked me until the dress rehearsal when the Earl Marshal said, "Have you got something to wear for this?" Whereas if you're a chap, it's the Privy Council court dress. But I got a sense that the King, and I'd heard his sort of ambitions for the coronation, because as Lord President, you have a private meeting with him before every Privy Council meeting. And he wanted, I think rightly, he wanted the full Monty coronation robes. He wanted all of that, but he wanted it to be a modern service. And he clearly chosen people to present the regalia to him who were representative of the nation. And I do think that, because it wasn't a foregone conclusion that the whole of my role would have been in there. I didn't actually know it would be until 2 weeks before the event, when we started rehearsing. And I think one of the reasons it was kept in was because I was a woman, and he wanted he wanted women to be seen in the ceremony. So so I knew what I wore was going to be very important, and I had to fit in with my female cabinet colleagues. So I couldn't wear some outlandish rig. I had to be a day dress and a hat. I was standing next to the clergy with all their amazing robes on, and I also was with the military as well. So I needed something that didn't look totally out of place in all of those settings, and had some great people help me produce this amazing dress and headpiece, which is now with Christie's, and is going to, because I can only wear it again if I go to a fancy dress party as myself. And so they are finding a home for it, and we're going to do some great things with the proceeds. So.
Good. Well, that's fantastic. And the outfit, I don't really like talking to women about what they wear, but it was spectacular. And did that experience then, because I know you've just written a book which is coming out in the autumn, and did that experience lead into the book? Was that where this?
Yes, and well, that whole 18 months really. I mean, the spark for it was really the Accession Council, because I was a junior trade minister on Monday. On Tuesday, I was promoted into the Lord President role. On Wednesday, we tried to have a Privy Council with Her late Majesty to swear in the new government, the Truss administration. We started it, we didn't manage to finish it. And for me, that was testament to her devotion to duty. That I was thinking about my nan right before she died. The last thing I'd be asking her to do is hold a business meeting. But she was trying to do that. And then the following day she passed away. And on the Friday, I Googled Accession Council and was delivering it on the Saturday. And I was so worried, I was obviously worried about messing up dramatically, but we had identified the moment we lost the monarch as a moment of great peril for the nation. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that the public were going to accept a new monarch. And if something had gone wrong, you could quite easily see how things could escalate and get out of hand. And so I was really concerned about that. And after I'd done the Accession Council, I came outside into St James's Palace Yard to watch the proclamation the King had just commanded be delivered, that set across that amazing wave of proclamations around the country. And then the guards did 3 cheers to the King. And after that, I heard over the palace wall thousands of people, all right the way down to Trafalgar Square and across the park, cheering the new king. And at that moment, I knew everything was going to be all right. And of course it was amazing. All the amazing events that surrounded Her late Majesty lying in state, the funeral, the tributes, guards of honour from tractors and ponies, the marmalade sandwiches in Park. I mean, it was amazing. And it struck me that it was what carried us through that point, again, against the backdrop of the Truss administration, total political anarchy going on, was the ceremony. It was those tasks that allowed the whole nation to become involved, that saw that transition to a new monarch, that took into account the needs of every part of the country. And that really struck a chord with me. And I started thinking about the ceremonies that we have, in Parliament, with the monarchy, with law, with the military, but actually right the way through to cheese rolling and shin kicking and mad stuff that goes on in pubs and churches all over the land. And it made me think why we particularly do this as a nation. Our uncodified constitution is only held together by all the ceremony and the process and the habit. Our laws, many of them, are based on those habits. And so I've written this book called Pomp and Circumstance, Why Britain's Traditions Matter. And the first half of it is answering that question. And telling us how we can actually modernize as a nation. We just have to do it in a particular way. There was a wonderful 1944 film called This Happy Breed. The central character in there, Frank Gibbons, says, we're not like other nations. We've got our own way of doing things. We may be a bit slow and we may be a bit dull, but it suits us all right, and it always will. Radical reform, we don't like. We like continual pursuit of excellence. And so if you look at like House of Lords reform, nothing ever happens because no one likes to throw everything up in the air. So that's what the book is about. And the back half of it is on every single day of the year. It will tell you what is happening everywhere in Britain, from, trooping the colour to flounder squelching.
Excellent.
There we go.
Well, I didn't know we had that many, but I'm delighted that we do. And we'll look forward to the book when it comes out. Just quickly, before we're going to get to some audience questions, but I quickly want to ask you on the question of radical reform. Obviously, we've just had a poll out that now has put reform ahead of Labour and the Conservatives astoundingly in fourth place. So I know that you're keen to get back into politics, and indeed we're keen to see you back in politics, but what Conservative Party will you be getting back to? I mean, what is going on here?
So I think that although politicians like to make this about themselves, I think that culture precedes politics. That what you're seeing with the rise of reform is not about the charisma of Nigel Farage or an amazing coherent policy platform that has all the... Of course it's not. It's a response to, I think, a massive cultural change in the country. And what the public recognise is that Parliament, Whitehall, the mutuality that binds us, markets, are not delivering for them. There's so much effort and energy in Whitehall, so much legislation, so many white papers, reports, all these sorts of things. It's wasted energy. And the public, they're not necessarily, huge political animals. Less than 2% of the population are members of any political party. So they don't really care whether the cat is red or blue or turquoise or yellow or a combination of those. They just want things to work. They just want the cat to catch some mice. So, and when things don't work, or it takes an age, or you can't respond to things, or people see terrible injustices happening and the impression that nothing is actually happening in Whitehall, people don't want to stand for that. They want consumer rights protected. They want people who are gaming the system to be dealt with. They want some value for the taxes they're paying. They'd like their healthcare delivered in a way that actually suits their lives. And if you're not delivering any of those things and you don't see any hope on the horizon for how that can be delivered under these existing systems, you're then willing to just throw everything up in the air and take a punt on something completely different. So for any political party to really start to gain traction with the public again, they have to have a proposition that addresses those particular concerns. And they have to be able to demonstrate how this is going to radically change. The good news is we have huge opportunities to do that, AI being one of them. So politicians need to learn more about these things. They need to understand what the possibilities are. And they need to set out a hopeful, optimistic vision that gives people confidence in their nation again. Give us our mojo back, to coin a phrase. And I think reform will run out of puff because I think they won't be able to do those things in a way that is going to gain credibility and retain credibility with people. But my party can't rely on that. We have to reimagine how this all works. And that's a hell of a job, but we got to do it. And if we're not up for doing it, we should retire.
well, let's not everyone retire and leave reform to it. So I feel like they need someone asking some questions of them. So, and speaking of questions, do we have time for questions? Plenty of time. Okay. Don't be shy. This lady here.
Okay, so hi, lovely to meet you. We have met in the past. I also, like you, stood as a candidate in the last election as a member for the Conservative Party. I'm Suzanne Pearson. What you've said, of course, resonates with me. I was a long-term expat, so defence, for example, is very important, and the different eyes that we need around the world to understand what's happening. What I liked very much is that you touched upon incentivising, inspiring people in terms of what are we going to do, what are we going to stand for, and particularly, say, if we look at defence, getting the public behind us to understand why we do need to increase, spending on defence, arbitraging against other things, which we know, and there are many, many other things, are really difficult for people to appreciate and to want to let go of. So I just wondered what your ideas were in terms of how you take that forward.
Yes. So, I mean, the first step is you have to convince people that this is the right thing to do. For me, it is completely compelling. If we don't start to make these investments, we are going to be in a worse situation financially, but also having to pay in blood as well as treasure in short order. So, but once you accept that, you have to present the choices to the public about where you're going to be spending their money, and I think part of that is to demonstrate to them what it will bring back into the economy. The Treasury measures every pound that you put into the defence sector as you get a pound back. It's actually £3 for every pound you invest. Our armed forces are the biggest escalator of talent in this country. They're the largest education organisation that we have in this nation. I think you can make those cases too. But for me, the killer argument is always about having a deterrent. There is a wonderful graph called the Tarrant curve, which is named after a submariner, which shows you on the international stage the best return you get for taxpayers' money from your diplomacy through to development, to preempting situations, through to armed forces that provide deterrence, and then your actual intervention. And unsurprisingly, when you're actually involved in a hot war, that's the worst return on taxpayers' money. And it actually doesn't come out of the defence budget, it comes directly out of the Treasury. So as whatever you can do well upstream to prevent that situation happening, that is money well spent. And at the moment, we do not have what is required to provide that credible deterrent to defer, for example, future Russian aggression. That's absolutely critical. And I think there are ways of explaining that to the public, that this is about saving so much more that would otherwise be at stake. We have continually been involved in operations and very dangerous conflict situations, but obviously we're coming to the end of generations that will have had to serve in a world war, and so we don't have that example. What we have to have is the imagination that it could happen again. Thank you for your question.
We don't even need that much imagination at the moment, given where we are. The world is at war in two different places.
Exactly, and you don't. I think people, because of processes we've established in Parliament, think that you have a choice in certain situations. You will always have a choice whether you do something or not, whether you defend yourself or not, or whether you intervene in a situation or not. There will be scenarios where you will not have a choice. You will have to do this. And I think we just need to remind people that is a possibility.
Yeah.
Penny, we have a couple of questions online, if that's okay. So the first one comes from Siobhan Walsh. So she says, "Hi Penny, many thanks for your time today. It's been fascinating, and I wish the human aspect of politics was seen more. That aside, you were in a government which had, it felt, daily sleaze issues. I feel that MPs are poorly paid and work huge hours. How did it feel as a decent MP to see that around you?"
So I think that actually things like pay are less of an issue than it is about giving people with a huge variety of backgrounds coming into Parliament the tools they need to be the best they can be. As ministers, you're not given any information products. You know, in your businesses and your clients in their respective businesses, they will be given financial information daily. They will be given, you know, some tools to help them on situation. You don't get any of that as a minister. Those tools do not exist. When I was leader of the Commons and obviously a government minister, I set up two new initiatives, one for the Commons and one for ministerial life. I set up the first HR support for ministers. When you move from ministries, as I did, you know, almost every year, when you're on a kind of trajectory as a minister, every single new department you go to, you have to fill out your bank details. You have to tell them your name and, you know, all this stuff. There's no central HR, well, there is now, but there wasn't in Whitehall. There's no personal development for ministers. During Grenfell, the poor guy who was chairing the Cobra meeting, responding to the Grenfell incident as it unfolded, had never been in a Cobra meeting in their lives before. What possible hope chance do we give people? So you've got to get serious about professional development for ministers and giving them the situational tools that they need, the training they need to do their job well. So that is there in place. And on the Commons side, I've now established a system where as soon as you come into Parliament, you can really start to think about your development, and you can also start to think about what might lie beyond Parliament, when, you know, so you can continue a useful career, and you can gain qualifications alongside what you're doing in Parliament, whether it's board qualifications or whether it's an MBA or whether it's public policy or the Royal College of Defence Studies. You can do that alongside. I just think that's so important. That's more important than pay. And what you end up with is people who are exhausted, broken, sometimes financially broken, but certainly personally broken, that marriages will have broken up and all of that, and who come out the other end of this with nothing to show for it. And I think we just got to change the mindset on that, and we'll have braver politicians, and we'll have people at the end of their parliamentary career who aren't terrified of the life outside and all want to get into the House of Lords, which is, you know, not a good situation. That would just be so much better. So there's much more that we can do to build on those things that I established. And I think we've just got to try and intervene and support people before they end up in crisis situations. With regard to a lot of the sleaze, I'm amazed people found the time to get up to half of the stuff that they did. It was, you know, I don't understand that, but, you know, you want to be picking people coming into Parliament to be candidates who are robust, have integrity, and, you know, are capable people. Because if you're not a capable person, you can't help other people. And that's what we're all there supposed to be doing.
Siobhan, I hope that answers your question. And just want to say, I think the people at Mishcon are really lucky to have such a great development team in the academy.
You are. If you'd like to pop to the Commons and give them some advice.
Nicely done, Jan. Very nicely done.
Members of the Labour Party are alleged to be struggling with supporting a policy, whether it be welfare reform, cutting the winter fuel allowance. In your career, either as a backbencher or as a minister, did you ever disagree with policy but have to stand there in public supporting something you didn't agree with, and how did you manage that?
So first of all, I think that you have to present a kind of credible package to the public. So if you're just squeamish about certain cuts, you got to really think to yourself about what the alternative is. You got to try and present your government with solutions as opposed to pursuing a course of action that you think is not smart. But I actually managed to find ways of changing policy, or actually I have been on the naughty step a few times and rebelled. So I didn't do it every 5 minutes, but on the Lords reforms that were proposed under the coalition government, which I thought would have trashed Parliament, they would have ended the primacy of the Commons chamber. I was one of the lead rebels on that, and we defeated the coalition government. It was the largest rebellion since the Second World War. And I think we were right to do so.
Rory Stewart, in his book, said he was threatened that if he went through the lobby against Lord's reform, that was it for him by George Osborne, according to his book. Did anybody come back to you on that?
Diverting briefly to answer that secondary question, yes. And on the night of the vote, there were 3 escalatory measures. So that first of all, they'd get your normal whip to come and say, you do realise your career's over if you do this. And so, well, thank you very much, but I think it's very important. Thanks for the advice. Then they got the nicest cuddly whip who never said anything bad to come and put their arm around you and say, I'm really worried about you, Penny. I don't think this is a good idea. And that failed. And then they bring out the cabinet, the big guns. So I got a cabinet member. I shall not name them because of what I'm about to say. And they came up to me and they said, I was in the chamber and they said, I need to speak to you. Beckoned me out. We went into the voting lobby, closed the door behind him, and he said, your mind's made up, is it? You're gonna destroy your whole parliamentary future for this. And I said, I'm hoping that's not going to be the case, but yeah, this is a constitutional car crash. I'm going to vote with my conscience. I'm very sorry, but I'm going to do that. And I told everyone I'm going to do that. And he said, good on you. And then left. So you sometimes at moments like that was a really serious matter. You gotta stick with your principles. There were other things that I managed to change, and actually as leader of the Commons, where I really earned my money was stopping stuff happening. So I dealt with many pieces of secondary legislation every single month, and some of them were insane. I remember this one that was trying to deal with the backlog on driving tests by making it harder for people to pass their driving test. This was deemed to be a brilliant solution. So I killed off, I mean, that's where I really earned my money. I killed off a lot of crazy stuff. And then you get sort of lots of appeals, and sometimes ministers will come and see you, and some I actually took to cabinet because I thought they were so crazy. But that's what you're there to do. So I would say that you look at my voting record, I've been loyal, but I've always found ways of trying to get sensible things to happen. There are lots of things. I mean, the last legislative program that was put together, a lot of respect for Rishi, but would that have been my no, it wouldn't have been my legislative program, and I thought was also politically wrong as well. We kind of stamped on the fault lines of the party for legislation that we didn't even put through at the end of the session. So, but but you have to work as a team. But when it really matters, your job is to do what you think is right.
So do you, because Rory, the gentleman mentioned Rory Stewart's book, and in that book he said two of his main points were, one, you don't get the capable people, as the previous question, into Parliament because it's such an archaic system and you have to be involved in the party from when you were 14 all the way up until when you're 29, and then you finally get put in to campaign for a seat that you might actually win. And the other thing he says is once you're in, you can't do anything because every time you try and make a decision based on something that you know about or have a sort of moral obligation towards, you get sat on by your party. But you would say that maybe was his experience, but not your experience.
Correct.
Of politics. Recollections may vary.
Yeah, I mean, you ultimately, this is all about working with other people. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples. When I was at the Department for Work and Pensions, I wanted to do some things which were way out of the comfort zone of some of my officials. I wanted us, rather than try and come up with answers and then spend years trying to implement them, particularly a lot of things that would help on the disabilities agenda. I wanted to post problems at 9 a.m. and get smart tech people to have solved them by lunchtime. And we did this on a number of fronts very successfully, but getting it going was really difficult because the civil servants who were directly involved in that were worried about their own reputations. So you have to kind of take people with you. You have to spend time on internal comms to make the argument and to get them there, or things that seem to be impossible to do. If you share the problem and you say to the entire building, I'm trying to do this, I'd welcome your ideas. Do floor walks, walk around the department, and sure enough, on floor 3 in the Department of Work and Pensions, I found a chap who had spent the last 5 years in his lunch hour thinking about exactly the same problem. And I met him, he pulled out his top drawer and said, I've done this, Minister. He didn't have to go through his boss or anything like that to get to me because I eyeballed him. That's how you find the people that have the ideas and the creativity and the technical know-how to get you to do things and do them at speed. Ditto with your parliamentary colleagues, understanding the pressures that they're under. So there's a lot of things that I didn't manage to do, but there are a lot of things I did manage to do. And one of the last ones I was really proud of was that I got the government to admit liability and be prepared to pay compensation for the infected blood victims. And I could only do that by persuading good civil servants and my fellow ministers, including those of the Treasury, that was the right thing to do. You can get things done.
Good. Well, maybe we'll have Rory back to see.
Compare notes.
We have another question online. Adele Hodgson wants to know, how do you think the Conservative Party can revive its position as the opposition?
So I think that for some time, the public will not want to hear from us. We failed them. I said this on my election night speech. You can't talk about the future and possibilities and give people hope if people are frightened. And they were frightened. They were frightened about cost of living. They were frightened about accessing healthcare. And that fear, what it does is still the future. So we need to recognise that. We need to recognise the turmoil of 5 prime ministers in 6 years. Going back to what I said about stability, reliability, certainty, that runs through the core of our nation. It's in everything that we do. If your government is not behaving like that, good luck. So there will be a period where even if Kemi is knocking it out the park, you know, the public won't want to engage with us. What we have to do is really get back to the fundamentals of service, what we're here to do. That requires us to listen. It requires us to really think deeply about not just how we tweak a service, but how we really reform this so it's meeting the expectations and hopes of the public. And in this day and age, that's going to require us to focus on fewer things, allow others to take over certain things, and to really give some responsibility back to the public who will welcome that level of responsibility. And we've got to give people fundamentally some pride in the capabilities of this nation. We have so much to offer. I wrote a book in 2021 called Greater, and it looked at how we actually do as a nation. We on every indices, we interviewed, in true sort of play your cards right fashion, 100 movers and shakers around the world. And it is all about the things that, you know, were holding us back actually reaching our full potential. People want our country to do so well. They are proud of it, but they kind of feel we let ourselves down at the, you know, at the final fence. And we just need to show people that we are capable as a nation. There are amazing people in this country doing incredible things. It's all still possible. But we have to put that program together to give people the confidence in that. That's a lot of work, and it will take time. What I think is vital is that we give Kemi the time to do that. And if there's another leadership contest or agitation to have one, we will be demonstrating solely that we have learnt nothing whatsoever from the last few years.
And is she, because I mean, given this recent poll, given the knocking the Conservatives got in the council elections, is she going to be given that time? Because there's already murmurings, and the Conservatives are,
I think she
particularly cutthroat with their leaders.
I think she will, but I mean, if there is that, then we will show that we have learnt nothing, and we'll be in a worse situation. You know, I think her instincts are right. She understands the volume of work that's required to do this. She understands what good should look like, and we just need to give her the time and the resource and the support to do it. It's a team effort. It's not just all about her. It's about the parliamentary party, but also, you know, our citizens and our supporters around the country. But that's what we've got to do.
And is that why you think the recent poll has got the Conservatives in fourth? Is it a reflection of the country still not wanting to see or hear from the Conservatives?
I think that is the case. I think it is going to take time to earn the right to be heard.
I think we've got time for one more question. Is there anyone in the room that has a question?
Hi. With the benefit of hindsight, do you think Brexit was a good idea?
I'm afraid I do, but only if we stay the course. There were lots of reasons why people voted the way they did. The budget, having to be a so-called rule taker, you know, many reasons. But fundamentally, it was about leaving the orbit of an institution that approached regulation in a particular way. And those are the choices now. Sometimes this is framed in the media as you have to choose between Europe or the US, you know, blocks of nations. That's not what this is about. It's an approach to how we regulate, which doesn't sound very interesting or, you know, but that is what it is about. So I was always persuaded that actually that was the optimum, that we would that the EU would put in place frictions on trade, for example, or cut off access to particular things to protect the integrity and the benefits of being part of the union. But that would change over time. And then we would be in a position to be able to have deeper trading relationships with other parts of the world. The worst place to be is if having chosen to be outside of that system of regulation, you don't make use of it, and you start to eat away at the opportunities that you have, so that you end up being hoovered back into that regulatory orbit. The sweet spot for us is if we manage to get a federal deal with the US and we continue our state level economic agreements with the US, which is where all the regulation lies, massive opportunities for legal services, for example. And we retain an independent trade policy and regulatory autonomy. What is happening now, I'm afraid, is the worst of all possible worlds, because you have not got the benefits of membership, and we're losing the benefits, which I think outweigh the benefits of membership, of being outside that regulatory bloc. So some of the legislation that was passed in the last Parliament that open up those opportunities for us now are not going to be possible, because we're starting to commit to following particular regulations in the EU. That's kind of like the worst of all possible worlds. Pick a trajectory and stick with it, whichever one that is. None of this is, it's reversible, but I just think that's a waste of time. And I had always hoped that we would be able to kind of set out a vision on things like trade, which has massive possibilities to alleviate poverty all over the world, that we could be an absolute leading light in forums like the WTO for doing that. And I've never bought the argument that defence or security cooperation is only a good thing if it comes with more fish. It's a crazy position. So I'm a bit disappointed about our current government's plans for that. But we'll see where we are. But our business community is amazing, and they'll get through it. I hope so. Yeah.
Great. Well, Penny, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating to hear from you, and thank you all for coming and for listening online.